AEW Dynamite starts off with Pac versus Darby. I've been enjoying what they've been doing with Pac and Darby. We got Darby trying to get that final victory over the Death Riders, trying to get that victory over the one Death Rider that he couldn't defeat. This was a really good match. Good way to open the show. Majority of this match is just basically Darby Allin being a crash test dummy for 90% of the match. But towards the end, we end up getting a ref bump. Darby ended up putting Pac in a submission hold. Pac taps out, but there's no referee. You get interferences from Wheeler Yuta, but Darby takes him out. Then eventually you end up getting Darby end up putting a steel chair in between Pac ankle, hits a coffin drop on it, then puts him back in a submission hold and taps him out. Like I said, I enjoy what they've been doing with this Darby and Pac storyline. Even though I haven't been uploading AEW, I still have been watching it. The past few weeks have been improvements overall than what they was doing for majority of 2025. So in tonight's show, I thought was solid. So we're going to see how these AEW Dynamite review continue. If I'm going to continue with them, if they continue to produce good content like they've been for the past few weeks, I will. But this was a good way to open the show. I enjoyed it. I hope this is the end of the feud, though, of the whole Death Rider stuff, because the Death Rider storyline just wasn't really working, and it's something that is very hard to get invested due to the inconsistency, especially with them turning Jon Moxley babyface for whatever reason. So that kind of defeats the purpose of Darby defeating all of the Death Riders due to Jon Moxley being the babyface. And to be honest, they should have just had Jon Moxley be his final opponent if that was the case, if they wanted him to go through all of the Death Riders. But it is what it is. This was a good way to start a show nonetheless. I'm hoping this is the end though. Afterwards, we end up getting a quick little segment between Swerve, Hangman, and Kenny Omega. This originally started off with Hangman versus Brian Keith. Samoa Joe sent Brian Keith to defeat Adam Page, but we all knew Adam Page was going to win. They all three basically make a claim to go after the AEW World Championship. I like this. I like showing all of these guys in the main event scene. We need all three of these guys in the main event scene. This was something that was missing in Hangman's run, so I like that they're doing it with MJF. Then eventually Swerve and Hangman leave. Then you get the Don Callis family comes out. I am so sick of the Don Callis and Kenny Omega. I really am. It looks like they're not going to continue the Andrade and Kenny Omega thing, which I find very confusing, but it is what it is. You end up getting Don Callis comes out, really doesn't say much. He just offers Kenny Omega a chance to get closer to the world title picture by offering a match, because Kenny ended up saying that he needs to win some matches. So next week we're going to get Josh Alexander versus Kenny, which should be a good match. Probably could have put Andrade in that spot to continue that storyline, that you started, but then you had to stop due to the whole contract stuff. But I don't know. That's what I personally would have done to continue that storyline, but they're clearly going in a different direction. But I like this overall. I like the constant chase of the babyfaces trying to chase that Dashley heel, which is MJF. So I like what they're doing here. It makes the world title picture a lot more interesting, because this was something that was definitely missing in Hangman's reign. So I like that now they got all the main event talent back on their roster, back active. I like what they're doing so far, especially if they add Will Ospreay in the picture. That's only going to make it better eventually whenever he could come back. So I like what they did here. This was a really good segment. We get a fatal four-way match for the number one contendership match for the AEW World Tag Team titles. You end up getting Jet Speed, Young Bucks, GOA, and you end up getting the Don Callis family with Mark Davis, and I forgot the other guy. This was a solid match. It was a really solid match. I will admit this match was heavily carried by the Young Bucks and Jet Speed. Very shocked by the winner. Don Callis family ended up picking up the victory. You end up getting interferences from Jack Perry, Ricochet to continue that storyline. You got Jack Perry going against Anthony Bowens on Collision to determine who's the number one contender to face Ricochet, which Jack Perry will win. Don Callis family won. Bit confused though, because they're going to be facing FTR, and FTR is another heel group. Now, heel and heel dynamics can work. I'm more of a fan of heel and heel dynamics because I just find it weird that in wrestling, every heel are just friends for whatever reason. It just depends on the type of heels that can make it work. This situation, I just don't understand it. Plus, I just have a hard time believing Don Callis' family is going to actually defeat FTR, especially any team with Mark Davis is just not believable. I'm sorry. So I don't really care for this, to be honest. I was kind of hoping Jet Speed or Young Bucks win, even though I don't really want to see FTR versus Young Bucks again, but they're the only teams that can realistically beat FTR. Jet Speed, I like their in-ring ability. Character-wise, I think they're very bland and boring, but from an in-ring perspective, they're amazing. So we'll see how this all unfolds, but I'm assuming most likely the predictable outcome, which is FTR defeating the Don Callis family. Later on, we end up getting the Triangle of Madness with Tekla and Sky Blue and Julia Hart versus Bays of Wrath with Willow and Harley Cameron and Chris Statlander. This was a fine match. The match wasn't. It was a fine match for what it was, but Tekla did end up pinning Chris Statlander, which I did like. They've been pushing on Tekla for a bit. They're trying to push Tekla versus Chris Statlander, which I think should be a really good match. I think the feud can be very interesting as well. And it's kind of even. It's not this whole numbers game advantage because Chris Statlander has Bays of Wrath, and then you got Tekla who has the Sisters of Sin. So I like this. This is very interesting. I'm a bit late to the Tekla fan club, but I like her. I like Tekla. I like her in ring. I like her character. Really good on the microphone. So very interested to see how this plays out. I could potentially see her actually dethroning Chris Statlander as a heel. Now, I don't think she will. I think they're going to keep the title on Chris Statlander for a bit, but it wouldn't shock me if Chris Statlander actually lost his title. But nonetheless, I like what they're doing. I like this feud. I think this has a lot of potential if booked properly. Plus, you got the Sisters of Sin going after Willow and Harley. They could potentially throw them for the AEW Women's Tag Team titles as well. Again, I don't think neither of these women are going to lose their titles, but it is a more realistic option. Definitely more realistic than what they was doing with Jamie Hayter going after Chris Statlander. So this could be very interesting. So I did like that Tekla picked up the victory, gives her some more momentum, gives her some heel heat. So Chris Statlander has to try to get her win back. So I like what they did here. We finally get to the main event, Bandito versus MJF for the AEW World Championship. This was a really good match. Really enjoyed it. MJF ends up picking up the victory. He ends up making Bandito pass out. After the match, though, he ends up giving a heartfelt speech about how Bandito will eventually become AEW World Champion, but then he attacks him. He was trying to steal his mask, but I was finna call him Bandito, but Brody King comes out, prevents it from happening. We could potentially see a Brody King MJF match potentially next week due to the attack of Bandito. I could see. So I'm interested to see what they do with MJF. I like the match overall. Bandito, of course, wasn't going to win this match, but I do like what they're doing with MJF as a heel. Interested to see how they book the rest of his reign, especially with guys like Hangman, Swerve, and Kenny Omega. But they all have I cannot speak. They all have journeys that they have to go through before they get to him. You have Hangman still dealing with Samoa Joe and the Ops. Kenny Omega still dealing with the Don Callis family. Swerve don't really have an obstacle to face yet, so we'll see what they do with Swerve. But nonetheless, I like what they're doing. Overall show, it was a decent show. It was a decent, enjoyable show. Something I couldn't have said for a very long time. So I enjoyed the show. Now, one thing I do want to mention is Powerhouse Hobbs. Now, the reports are saying that Powerhouse Hobbs is officially leaving AEW, is going to WWE. That is a big, well, I'm not going to say it's a big loss for AEW, mainly because they weren't using Powerhouse Hobbs that much. He was mainly in the trio stuff, but to be honest, the trio stuff isn't that important. So this is a good move for WWE. I like Powerhouse Hobbs. I always thought he had untapped potential, to be honest, wasted potential, if I'm being honest. And I think they can unleash it in WWE. Now, I don't see him being a world champion, but he could definitely be like a solid mid-card guy. Definitely see him being in NXT because NXT needs the body, especially for the men. He could be NXT champion or North American champion. Either way, it works. So I'm very excited for him to be in WWE, to be honest. Now, it's not confirmed, but those are the main reports coming out that he's definitely going to WWE. Whether he goes to the main roster or NXT, either way, I'm fine. But very interested to see how that plays out. You guys let me know your overall thoughts, opinions on that, because like I said, I don't think it's a huge blow for AEW because they weren't using him that much anyway. Plus, this doesn't really affect the Ops storyline because they still have Shibata and Hook, so Hook could just replace Powerhouse Hobbs anyway, and plus that was the original plan anyway. So this works out either way, in my opinion. Hobbs go to some, plus WWE are way better at booking big men than AEW because AEW don't book big men well. It's typically WWE that knows how to book big guys like Powerhouse Hobbs. AEW typically don't know how to book guys like that. So WWE is a more better fit for him anyway. But you guys let me know your overall thoughts on that. Overall show, it was a solid show overall. But you guys let me know your overall thoughts, opinions down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my content. But yeah, that's it.